Hi guys, so Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, got a massive laugh from the House of Commons at Boris Johnson's expense on Wednesday. This clip was wonderful and I'd like to see more of it. It even got Boris Johnson smiling. It's important that Starmer hits the Tories in two ways. One is on trust and the other is on taxes. Labour needs to destroy the myth that the Conservatives are the party of sound economic management. The raising of taxes to fill the hole caused by dodgy PPE contracts and the billions handed over to Dido Harding need to stick. I think this was a good response from Starmer. Enjoy.
Lots of words, lots of bluster, no answers. Word of warning. Word of warning, Prime Minister. That's not going to work with the police.
Love it. You even got a smile from Boris Johnson. Unfortunately, we can't see any other members of the front bench. We can barely see their faces, but I'm pretty sure some of them are smiling as well. Trying not to, but probably smiling as well.
I'll tell him why they're putting taxes up. Low growth. In the decade of Tory government before the pandemic, growth slumped. It was much, much weaker than under the last Labour government. If the Tories matched our record on growth, we would have £30 billion more to spend on public services without having to raise a single tax. Mr. Speaker, surely even this Prime Minister doesn't need someone else to tell him that he and the Chancellor are having to raise taxes because the Tories failed to grow the economy over a decade.
And it's not just a lack of growth and the raising of taxes. It's also inflation, because inflation, in a sense, is a tax on the poor. What he could also have mentioned is the PPE contracts, the dodgy PPE contracts, the billions that have been spent on PPE that was not suitable for the NHS, the billions that were spent, that were written off, I should say, due to fraud that has increased. So much money being wasted, and in order to recoup the costs, the Conservatives are raising taxes. Now, I think what Starmer needs to do, and I think he's doing it here, is he needs to undermine this myth that the Conservatives are the party of sound government, sound economic management. He needs to undermine this, because if he does, then you're going to have more and more traditional voters, for the traditional Conservative voters, switch to the likes of the Liberal Democrats, maybe even the Labour Party. You need to drive a wedge between the voters and their perception of the Conservative Party.
No, Mr. Speaker, I think everybody in this country can see that we've been through the biggest pandemic since for 100 years, that we've looked after the people of this country to the tune of £400 billion, that we've put into furlough and all the other schemes, 11.7 million people protected. Everybody knows the cost of that, Mr. Speaker. And at the same time, in spite of all the difficulties that we have faced, we have now got the fastest growth in the G7.
Okay, that's not true. But also, notice how Johnson says, everybody knows, everyone believes this. This is a sort of Trumpian trick to try and convince the public that if they disagree, they are in the minority. Because the majority of people think Boris Johnson's doing a wonderful job. Everyone thinks that Boris Johnson is doing a fantastic job considering the pandemic. Now, a question I have, which is completely unrelated to what he said. Why are there only 4 people in this frame wearing a mask? On the other side of the aisle, a majority, I've noticed a few members of the DUP, but let's park those for a moment. Well, a majority on the other side are wearing masks. It seems to be a minority here are wearing masks on the Conservative side. Why is that? Liz Truss tested positive on Monday, and a lot of these people were sitting next to her. Anyway.
Absolutely true. We've got youth unemployment. We've got youth unemployment at a record low, Mr. Speaker. We've got 3 times as much tech investment coming into this country as there is in France, twice as much as there is in Germany. Yes, that's absolutely true, Mr.
When Boris Johnson says, yes, that's absolutely true, then you know it's a lie.
Speaker. And never forget, if you want to know about Labour economics, never forget the last time they were in office, Mr. Speaker, when they were finally booted out, they left a note saying there's no money left. That's the way they run the country, Mr. Speaker.
Now, what is he talking about here? Well, what he's talking about here is a guy called Liam Byrne. Liam Byrne used to be the Chief Secretary of the Treasury under the last Labour government. It says here, on leaving his position as Chief Secretary to the Treasury, following the change of British government in May 2010, Byrne left a note to his successor David Laws saying, "Dear Chief Secretary, I'm afraid there is no money. Kind regards and good luck, Liam." Byrne later claimed that it was just typical humour between politicians, but regretted it since the new government used it to justify the wave of cuts that were introduced. The note echoed Chancellor Reginald Malling's note to James Callaghan, who said, "Good luck, old cock. Sorry to leave it in such a mess," after the Conservatives' defeat in the 1964 election. This is a joke between politicians, okay? It's a joke between secretaries of the Treasury. But what happened was David Cameron's government used it, jumped on it, as an excuse to impose 10 years or 10 years, let's call it 10 years and years of austerity. It was a joke, but they used it as a means to punish the poor. Austerity was to punish the poor, because the rich did not suffer under austerity. The poor did. And we've seen the cuts to the NHS as an excuse of the last Labour government's mismanagement or being no money left. It's a joke also because that's not how it works. Governments can raise they can raise taxes to increase their finances. They can borrow money to increase their finances. It's not that there isn't a kitty, there isn't a pool of money that when it's finished, it's over and there is no money left. It was a joke. You can't use that as an example of the Labour Party not being able to run the country. But it's difficult to respond to this because it's so absurd. But we've seen 8.7 billion pounds wasted on PPE contracts. It was lost. 8.7 billion pounds of lost money in regards to PPE contracts. Many of these contracts, of course, were given to Tory donors, companies set up, over a weekend to profit from that. And then the 4.3 billion pounds that was written off due to fraud. And Boris Johnson and the Chancellor are still trying to convince people that they are the party of sound government. They are the party of the economy. I hope this myth is broken. It will take time and effort, but I think it eventually will be broken. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.